Hello, and welcome to session number 17, where we'll continue our discussion. Let's now take a moment and examine many of the acts of the previous administration that I consider to be significant mistakes that resulted in very serious problems for the country and for the people. It will also remind you of the kinds of things you could expect from any future administration that is controlled by those who are political conservatives. All this as we examine past mistakes and consider other things. The reasons that I've been stating in the previous videos are the reasons why our government, under the previous administration, which was supposedly elected in 2000 and again in 2004, tried to misrepresent their legislation for our forest lands, why they misrepresented their plans for our children's education, why they misrepresented the so-called benefits of their tax cut, why they shamelessly used the tragedy of September 11th to reduce and even remove far too many of our civil liberties, which, once lost, are very difficult to regain. Why they spoke at veterans rallies while cutting benefits for veterans. Why they misrepresented and changed several times the reasons for going to war in Iraq, where more than 4,300 fine young Americans from the military lost their lives, and thousands more have been injured, along with tens of thousands of Iraqis. As if all of these things that they did were not more than enough, that was also the reason why they didn't want to have government employees doing jobs now handled by the government if these same jobs could be privatized, meaning that they wanted to turn those jobs over to the private sector, where the first priority is never the product or service being provided, but must be the profits of the bottom line, first, last, and always. We'll have more discussion about privatization a bit later. I had false hopes that our country and its new leaders, elected in 2008, would make every effort to make its people and their welfare a higher priority than this bottom line. But the current power structure is now so built in to our system of government that many of those who were formerly in political control in the previous administration still wield great influence and power, and along with other politicians, pundits, paid lobbyists, and the media, have successfully prevented for years millions of people in this country who had no health insurance from receiving adequate and affordable health insurance, and thereby kept them from having adequate health care, in order to allow the health insurance industry to continue to increase their profits at the expense of the people's health. That's only one of the tragedies resulting from the way things were then, and the way too many of them still are today. The healthcare legislation that was finally passed is too watered down to be as effective as it should be, and may cost some subscribers more than it will be reasonable for them to pay, especially when so many of them are already sorely pressed financially. Why haven't we joined the rest of the civilized, industrialized nations by providing low-cost, adequate health insurance, and thereby making adequate and truly affordable health care available to all of our citizens at a reasonably low cost, or even at no cost? Why also have we not taken so many other important steps to help jobs, education, infrastructure, and so many other important matters in the way that other countries have done? Because far too often, it might take a few dollars out of the bank accounts of those who already have more money than they and their children and their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren can ever spend. Put very simply, it's all about money and power, and about keeping the money and power right where they are today, while keeping the rest of us dependent on whatever crumbs they allow to trickle down from time to time. Let's now consider another aspect of this long-standing state of affairs. You need to be aware, if you don't know already, that the ultra-wealthy elite realized long ago that the way to accomplish their goals is for all of them or their representatives and agents to come together, figuratively if not literally, by one means or another, and work together for the same goals. Many years ago they began in great earnest to step up to the pace of their ongoing but previously more subtle efforts to do whatever they felt was necessary to discredit or otherwise defeat those who disagreed with them or who were opposing their candidates for political office, and to make their agenda look and sound more palatable to the voters. About 30 or so years ago they began to do these things much more openly than in the past. There have been and are still very large numbers of people who are working in a very purposeful manner for that same common goal, to implement what seems to be their shared idea to make their very conservative agenda the law of the land in America, and to keep it that way. It appears to be their intent to have the country's political pendulum continue to swing in their direction, far to the right, ad infinitum. It then seems to be their idea that the pendulum will never be allowed to swing back the other way. The recent Supreme Court decision that gave corporations the right to spend unlimited funds in order to elect someone favorable to the ultra-wealthy elite, and or to prevent the election of someone unfavorable to them, is another example of what I've been describing. Those in the corporate structure have, in some cases, almost unlimited funds, and they can literally buy the elections to suit their needs. At this point, just for the sake of clarity, and for those who may not know, I'm going to point out that in the United States there exists the political left, generally Democrats, and the political right, generally Republicans. Around this planet, on the left there are varying degrees of liberalism, which most of you know about, and as one moves further and further to the left, there is then socialism and finally communism. On the right there are varying degrees of conservatism, and as one moves further to the right, there is increasing militarism, a police state, and finally fascism, or that which was practiced by Hitler and the Nazis, and by Mussolini and his people. I trust that this will provide a stronger foundation from which to consider the facts covered in these videos. Let's take some time now to delve even further into what those who are in financial control want to see happen. We'll do this in order to help you decide whether you want to be aligned with them or not. We can begin by asking some questions, and you consider what you believe the answers should be. Do you feel that everyone who could benefit should have equal access to a good education, including college, and if they can't afford the cost of that education, they should still receive the education regardless? Do you feel that everyone should have equal access and opportunity for a job with a living wage and reasonable benefits? Do you feel that everyone should have the right to adequate medical insurance and quality medical care, even if they're unable to afford these things? Do you feel that everyone should have the right to decent housing so they can make a home for themselves and their family? Excuse me. Do you believe that everyone who does their best to work hard and play by the rules and be a good citizen should have the right to a decent life? If you answered yes to these questions, then you are not aligned with that which far too many of the ultra-wealthy want to see in this country, and I congratulate you. For some of you who may have been able to answer no to one or more of these questions, perhaps you feel that since you had to work hard for all that you have, then why should others be helped instead of having to do the same as you did? I commend all of you who have worked hard and have something to show for it. But perhaps you should ask yourself whether it might have been different for you had you experienced a great deal of sickness perhaps during your life, or if you had a disability, or if your upbringing had been other than what it was, or even if the color of your skin had been different. I'm not unaware that some of you may have done well despite such obstacles, but let us all hope that if you are one of those persons who have a lack of compassion for those who are even less fortunate, that those who lack such compassion will not somehow have taken away from them that which they now have. I tell you now that in the eyes of Almighty God, we are our brother's keeper. There was no doubt left regarding this fact when the New Testament of the Judeo-Christian Bible related to us the story of the Good Samaritan. That should leave no doubt whatsoever in anyone's mind about that fact, that we are our brother's keeper. At this point, we will end session number 17. I thank you for watching, and in session 18, we will continue our discussion. Thank you again.